Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock practicing necromancer. And tonight I want to, how should I say this? Discuss with you a prospect of success. Think about it like this: what does it take to become successful as a practitioner, as an employee, or even, say, for an example, as a significant other? It's not about being available, it's about the disciplined mind state of being committed and dedicated to achieving your goal. So how do you go about doing this? Well, a prime example is Rockefeller. You think this billionaire got to where he is by playing it safe, by listening to everybody with an opinion, giving in to society's norms and their whims? No. No. They didn't do that. He didn't do that. No. To quote Bohemoth X, fuck what people think. Fuck what people think. To quote my spiritual father, my sheik, if you will, he basically said that I speak as a man. I speak what I mean to say. And yes, I'm using my own vocabulary here when quoting him. Hello, Brandon. So, what does it take to be successful? First of all, grow up. Okay? Not everybody is your friend. Okay? Even Bokor Leonard Elmera has said this in videos. Not everybody is your friend. A lot of them are going to be envious. A lot of them is going to be jealous of you and try to keep you down, to keep you in the muck like everyone else. So they'll create turmoil. They'll create, some kind of disturbance that's going to keep you occupied from achieving your goals. Now, with that said, I'm going to point you in the direction of a few sources here. Look at Machiavelli as an example, the prince. He used an early version of what we call today psychology. You know, the psychology of a prince, the prince, amazing thought forms. How he thought about what he was going to say, how he presented himself, how he can walk into a room, command respect instantly. But he never chased anything, it was given to him. Did you ever ask yourself why? Why did people just hand him things? Why did they bow down to him? Why did they show respect to him? Well, first of all, let's look at Rockefeller. It is said that he put in 100 hours per week. That's 14 hours per day, 7 days a week. Now look at your magical studies. Look at your studies into your religious practices, your philosophical practices. Look at how much time you put into internal alchemy to better yourself, not just to better yourself, but to get an understanding of who you are, what you're about, and where you want to be. Okay? The art of war is based off strategic placement, the understanding of oneself versus one's enemy. Look at the 5 grounds that you can, a battlefield. Look at the strategic perspective behind it. Now, if we go to, say, for example, Robert Greene's work, 48 Laws of Power, this is more modern day through stories of the past. Now, most of today's witches and warlocks, that's all they've got. Stories. Things that were passed down through mouth, through grimoires. Things like the Grand Grimoire, Red Dragon, the Black Raven, the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, the Constitution of Pope Honorius, the Magus. How about the 3 books of occult philosophy by Agrippa? How about the challenging of oneself through the ONA, the Order of the Nine Angles? Look how dedicated they were to their religious studies or their philosophical studies. You go back throughout history, you're going to see countless examples of those who are heavily influenced by both philosophical perspectives, but also religious perspectives. Take them for an example. Let's go with the Hashishin. The more in-depth zealot, if you will, the followers. It is said that they use something called hashish, which is a drug that is based off the chemicals produced by narcotics. Things like pot, cocaine, if you will, that reduced fear. That's right, reduced fear. Emilio, welcome to the channel. User, welcome to the channel. But here it is. I want you to think about this just for a moment. Look at your hardships. Look at your goals, your whims on where you want to be. Now look at your daily practices. What's holding you back? Is it fear of success? Is it the fear of what your friends or family would think of you? If you came out saying, hey, I'm a practicing Satanist or a voodoo zant, perhaps you're into Santeria or Pedo Mayumbi or even Brujeria, Quimbanda even. Maybe you decided to come out as a dark pagan or modern day Wicca. Who knows? You could have easily, left the occult and gone into the more right-wing factions like the JCI, the Judo-Christian institutions. Let's say mainstream Christian, okay? But if we went that route, why don't we go into the Vatican? Let's look at the hierarchy of the Vatican. Let's look at the various different divisions that they've had, from the exorcists, the more zealotry, if you will, going up against the demonic forces, if you will. Or how about the more physical applications of the Knights of Templar? Think about that for just a moment. These guys were heavily influenced by war. They were soldiers. They were knights, but they were also holy men. They were monks. You know, you go back to the Hashishin, the Order of Assassins, Middle Eastern, which means now you're getting into Islam. You know, you're getting into more of the radical regimes, if you will, out of Islam traditions. Now, they too were considered to be warriors, you know, assassins, the Simsera. But they were also holy men, monks, religious personnel. Wow, amazing, right? Now, even if you want to go with Orthodox Christianity, look at their Messiah. Where was he found when he was in his youth growing up? It wasn't school. No. He was always found in mosques, temples, holy places, learning from monks to become a magi, a mage, a man of enlightenment, because that's what he sought. He sought truth. He sought enlightenment, education. You know, even on the left hand path, we have many that claim to be seeking enlightenment. But how many actually ascend? Through knowledge, through wisdom, through enlightenment. I mean, think of the very terminology of apotheosis. What is apotheosis? It's the ascendance to godhood. Now, how do you achieve that? Through self-mastery. Self-mastery leads to self-evolution. And to do that, you must have knowledge. You must know what you are talking about. That means whatever you're preaching, you must back it up with numerous sources. Now, the other ironic part here is that even though most people are more armchair magicians, you know, keyboard warriors, most of these individuals are just that. They're not worth your time or your energy. They're more like psychic vampirism. You know, psychic vampires, as Anton LaVey so colorfully pointed that out in the Satanic Bible. Now, what's ironic is that even Michelle Belanger, a well-respected author, an occultist, I might add, she wrote a book on psychic vampires. I highly recommend that, by the way. Very, very good read. It's a little dull in spots, but it's a very excellent read. Now, if you really want to learn about vampirism, go into Father Sebastian's works. He's got several good works. My favorite happens to be The Vampire Sanguine by him. Very amazing. He actually lives the part, and he's known as the Godfather of New York. Last time I heard, he was out west somewhere. I think it was in San Francisco, Nevada area. I don't know if he moved there or if he was just visiting to open up new covens. I don't know. I haven't really been following his career a lot over the last few years. But here it is. Whatever it is that's holding you back, I want you to think about Seneca's book on the shortness of life. 95% of what you worry about is undue stress. You don't want to be dragged into drama. You don't want to be dragged into somebody else's war. You don't want to fall into the snares and the traps of the world. This is why ghost mode or monk mode is very, very important. You see, depending on which one you're going for, ghost mode is more 3 to 6 months. of just disappearing, to educate yourself, to learn a new skill, to get more spiritually in tune with the current that you are working with. One of the things that I learned in this fashion was called uh, Sufism. This particular tradition is more radicalized, but it's more occultized. It's not black and it's not white, it's more gray. And from what I understand, this particular practice deals with animalistic instincts, the termination of livestock, and it's more inclined to more internal adepts, if you will. It's based off of Islam. So, like I said, it doesn't matter if you're left hand path or right hand path in this area. Disappearing without notice for 3 to 6 months is a good thing because you're bettering yourself. Now, if you really want a good challenge, go with monk mode. Monk mode is doing the same thing, but for an entire year. That's 6 months to a year. And you're basically leaving technology behind, you're leaving the world behind, just to practice what you're doing. This is done through education. This is done through practice. Look at those who have just gotten up and left the, let's go with call it the Western world, to join a Shaolin monastery and become a Shaolin monk. You know, look at what they've given up. Look at what they've done and sacrificed to forge their bodies into such warriors. They're not just Buddhists, They're not just Buddhists. They're warriors. And they're on a whole different level than most martial artists are today. But the key is that there's also a little thing that Machiavelli put into play called God mode. Now, the God mode aspect, whew, that takes zealotry and spiritual faith to a whole new level. And to be fair, that is something that needs further delving into. There's only a few videos that actually speak to God mode, and one of them is done by the prince himself, Machiavelli. So you got to take this into your life as you see fit. But I wanted to put this out there because it speaks to your commitment to your path. It speaks to your dedication and your self-motivation to better yourself. If that means sitting there looking at your friends and family and say, hey, I'm going to be disappearing for a little bit, for a certain amount of time, let's say 3 to 6 months, don't be alarmed. I will be back and I'll get back in touch with you when I'm done doing what I'm doing. I'm just working on something. That puts them at ease, so they know that, hey, you're going to be okay. It's just you're just not going to be available to them for a while. But if you go monk mode, that means you're going to be disappearing for a year, which means you're going to be so engrossed in your and be worried about what's going on with with your government, or what's going on between nations. You're going to be so wrapped up in your studies, your practices, and bettering yourself through self-mastery, self-evolution, and apotheosis, that you're really going to be coming back as a whole new being that is unrecognizable from who you used to be. And don't even get me started on what will happen if you go God mode, as Machiavelli so colorfully put it in The Prince, in the teachings and the lessons that he put there. That is something, like I said, a whole new level of discipline and self-mastery. And a lot of people, they can't cut it. They just can't do, what I just said, ghost mode, monk mode, or even God mode. because they're too afraid. They're too wrapped up in worldly things. You know, it's it's really sad to see. Somebody calls somebody, a name for an example. I'm just going to use a couple of examples here. You know, there was a guy that I knew, a working. He wrote one book that I'm aware of, and his name's Christian Day. And yes, I am going to pick on him for a little bit here. When I look at my son, who's 8 years old, I call him, we pick on each other and kind of roast each other, and, or at least his version of roasting, So I would look at him and go, I'd call him a puppy monkey baby, which is based off a 1990, late 1990s commercial of a drink, you know, and he came to me one day and he said, "What do you think about somebody calling somebody a monkey?" I call my son a monkey butt. So I'd play the devil's advocate here. And he didn't like it, so he blocked me, and then he'll unblock me, and then he'll block me again and unblock me, whatever. But I don't give a shit about that. You know, if you get so butthurt that you can't take criticism or you can't take a very, how should I say this, methodical perspective, an alternative perspective on any given topic without emotion, without getting invested in it, then that's on you. You know what I'm saying? So, learning to control your mind, learning to control your body, learning to tap in and control your spirit, your soul, if you will. Andrew Womack wrote a book called Mind, Body, and Spirit. And he did this by separating the three bodies of the personal makeup, if you will, the genetic makeup, if you will. And he did this by using the biblical scripture. And I really liked how he did that. Now, I'm not a Christian, but I liked the way he did that because he literally showed them as three separate, distinct personality traits. Different aspects of the same self. Even if you go into the Satanic Witch, by Anton LaVey, forwarded by Blanche Barton, you use the clock definition. You're going to learn about the different mentalities. Being dominant, submissive, what kind of job you're going to have. Are you more, manly or feminist? Are you going to be dominant or, whatever? What kind of car you're going to drive, what kind of house you're going to have, what kind of job you're going to have. But it goes further than that. And it really breaks it down to what is called the outer self, the outer male or female. And then you'll have the inner, inner male or inner female. You got, which goes into, how should I say this? The macrocosm versus the microcosm. The microcosm is where we are, and we want to be where the macro is. So you're going to be breaking down these three things. So even if you, I think my dog is having a dream. Her paws are just moving. She's chasing a bucky, a squirrel. But anyways, you're going to look at this and you're going to see these three features. So if you take a piece of paper and you put two circles next to each other, and then you do a third circle that connects both of them like three chains put together, you're going to be able to discern each one of these. Every religion, from Satanism to the left-hand path to that of, say for an example, Christianity or Islam, is working with the five pillars, the five elements. Now, what do these things have in common with you? Okay? And how are you going to utilize, through self mastery, each pillar to benefit your life and your career as an occultist, as a practitioner in your field? And like I said, it doesn't matter if it's work, it doesn't matter if it's your religious studies, your philosophical studies, your home studies, whatever. Hell, even if you're getting a hobby, there's nothing wrong with having a hobby, especially if you're married or you're seeing somebody. Always having that hobby is going to benefit you in the long run. But don't allow emotion to interfere with your goal reaching. You know, Machiavelli really points this out. He really points this out in God Mode. And I think personally that by going monk mode is a good thing because it sets you up for success in the long run. The ghost mode, 3 to 6 months, it's a great way to recharge your batteries. It's a great time to sit there and figure out what you want to do, especially after a month of being in solitude. You know, for an example, I went into monk mode for about a month, and I got rid of all my apps. I got rid of TikTok. I got rid of, Facebook. I got rid of Odyssey. I got rid of Instagram. I got rid of most of my accounts. And I think I only no, actually I no, I kept my TikTok account and I kept my YouTube account. But the thing is that here it is. After a month, you're going to have that mental breakdown of mentality of worldly pursuits are going to dissipate. And you're going to start doing things on for yourself. You're going to be focused more on a goal. And then the second month is more about you achieving the victory of choosing a path working of what you want to do. Third month is more about taking that and learning everything you can. The rest of those 3 months is about applying it to your life, achieving that greatness, achieving that victory of whatever topic it is that you're studying during this time. But when you go monk mode, that's more of a religious zealot perspective. Okay? That's more like a hardcore practitioner. That's ONA style practices right there. And you'll see the difference when you get into studying these two. That's like becoming an alpha and going up against a sigma male or a woman for that matter. Think about the different levels of IQ, discipline, focus, everything. The knowledge, the dedication, commitment, and persistence to your goals and your aims. Whole different perspective. And then when you get into God mode, that's like going into the more darker aspects, like the Zeta. And the reason I'm using this is because these are more modern terms on social media. You got the alpha breed or the alpha male, groups on Facebook, or you got, a whole bunch of videos on the alpha male or the sigma male, the zeta male, and so forth. And now you got theta as well. And it's like, what the fuck? Who's coming up with this shit? And then you realize, okay, this is more psychological. And once you read a little pamphlet called 1440, then you realize that's why. That's why the news is the way it is. That's why the government is run the way it is. That is why society is run the way it is because it keeps you distracted from what needs to be done. So by the time you get back to looking at, Rockefeller, how did he become this millionaire? How did he become this billionaire? How did he become a trillionaire? Well, for one, he put 100 hours in at work. And you wonder, how did he have a family during this time too? I mean, if you're working 14-hour days, when's the time to meet someone? How do you even meet somebody during that time? I mean, you'd be coming back and you'd be like, you'd be dead on your feet. You'd probably just grab a bite to eat, probably fast food or something on the way home, and just fucking crash. Get up, take a shower, after about 5 hours of sleep, and then go right back and do it again. So, and that comes down to, how far you have to travel, what are you doing, what are you working on, and what is your aims. So, if I had to choose one of these three, ghost mode, monk mode, or God mode, I would choose God mode because that would be the challenge that, especially in Aries, would love to have. If you love a good challenge and really want to be a better version of yourself, that would be the way to go. That's just my humble opinion. But when I look back at, these practitioners that have come before me, those who are more successful than I am, it's not about being envious. I mean, yeah, with Baphomet X, I've always said I'm envious of his altar setups. I love it. But I've also stated that when it comes to Bokor Leonard Elmira, the guy's got knowledge. He's got game. Flat out game. He's got that psychological, manipulation or whatever you want to call it, that zeal, that allows him to be successful. But you also look at how he's employing it. He's got people working for him, but he's also making himself available to the public. He's going out there and he's doing the work. He's applying himself and his skills as a sorcerer, not just somebody who's read things like the 48 Laws of Power or some of these other books that he's recommended. And then when you get into, say, for an example, Graham Hustle's channel, I mean, this guy's put over almost 30 books, about 30 books out there of recommendations so far. I own most of them. And once I've read most of, all of these, I think I've got like 9 more left to go to purchase. But in the meantime, I found most of them on, the rest of these ones that I don't have on Everent, so I can actually listen to them in audio or read them in PDF. But either way, you look at what they bring to the table through the books. They bring knowledge, they bring wisdom, spiritual insight, mental insight, knowledge on certain topics like finances or business settings. If you think it, you can create it. And then you have what's his name, Bob Carlson, if I remember this comedian right. One of the things that he said is that what's the fucking point of getting self-help books? If you've already got the self-motivation to go out and get the book, then you should already have the proficient, motivation to go out and achieve your own goals without these books. You know what I'm saying? So think about it this way. What does it take to be successful in your career? If your family's holding you back, separate. If it's your business, find a way around it. Okay? Pick up new skills. Show yourself being dedicated to it. Show up an hour early, leave an hour later. Work through your lunch. Show them, hey, this is how I'm catching up on the work, but I'm going to go to my managers and go, hey, is there anything else that needs to be done? You know what I'm saying? If there's something else that can be done, something quick, I'll take care of it right now. So your morning is about you catching up, about getting your work together. Your lunch time is about catching up on that and getting things ready for the next go around for the following day. The rest of the workday is about doing stuff that most people aren't going to do. Okay? So those are some things that are going to benefit you in the long run, but you got to get rid of the distractions. You got to get rid of the things that are holding you back. And only you can discern what those are. And just remember, opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. The only one that should matter is your own. Where you're going, what you're doing. There is nothing wrong with going up to those more successful than you, those who are going places and being noticed by the higher ups and going, hey, what's going on? How come you keep getting distracted? How come the rest of us are doing all this work busting ass, but you guys are succeeding? What are you doing that we're not? You know what I'm saying? Getting that criticism and that advice is always a good thing, because then you learn the tidbits of the mechanism of success. All right? So that's just my thoughts of the night that I wanted to put forth. But like I said, I mean, what if Rockefeller didn't work 100 hours? That's 14 point something hours per day, like 14 and a half hours per day, almost 15 hours of work per day, 7 days a week. What if he didn't do that? What if he did 70 hours a week? What if he did 50 hours a week? Would he still have that determination? What about think rich and how should I say this? Think and grow rich. Or how about how to influence people and by Dale Carnegie. These two books and Napoleon Hill, these two books are magnificent. They deal with finances, they deal with inventing. Think and do. You think, you achieve. And that's done through motivation. That's self-motivation. So think about that. Think about that. What is it going to take for you to succeed? What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to do to achieve that? But I will tell you this, and this is something I truly agree on. Keep your mouth shut. Why? Because by speaking what you're doing, you are allowing your enemies who live amongst you in secret to block you, to counter you, and to get ahead of you. By remaining silent on anything, it doesn't matter if it's your spell work, it doesn't matter if it's your job, your career, or maybe you're just trying to seduce that woman or that man that you want to be with. Either way, don't talk about it, just do it. Go out there and achieve your goals. Plain and simple. The only time you should speak on it is when it's already come to fruition, not beforehand. Because if you are going up against another witch or a warlock, they have knowledge in this area. So don't you think they're going to put up shields, reverse it, send that magic right back to you? Perhaps they'll even curse you in return. So what's the point of speaking? Because if you speak on it, you're going to defeat yourself. And that's the moral of the story. But you have to step up to the plate and apply yourself to whatever you're doing. No matter what system of magic you're on, no matter what religion or philosophy you live by, step up to the plate and apply it 100%. 300%, 666%, and you will succeed. But most people quit too early. And that's another thing. So I want to thank everybody that's been here with me, from Brandon to Emilio, user. Thanks for jumping on here with me. Means a lot. And for those of you coming on after this, want to say thanks for jumping on here with me. You know, if you like what I do and what I put forth, these little tidbits, feel free to subscribe and to hit that notification button. It'll do you good in the long run. All right? Whatever you preach, always back it up with numerous sources and references. And always make yourself available to the public. You are responsible for the things that you do and say. All right? Have a good night. I'm out.